There's our KK,
Okie
John and
dokie. There's our KK. Yes, John and Jen Tree Man. 111. I keep seeing that number lately. I mean, what do you say? We got to say we're probably, well, it's messy, but I think we're in alignment. I mean, I keep seeing 111, but I keep seeing a mess too. Hi, K-Heads. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, K-Heads. Yeah, it's been a weird day. I mean, time seems weird. We got up early, I think, relatively early. And, we're just talking and just saying, we didn't eat lunch or dinner. And I'm not even really hungry.
I know. We've been kind of watching what's going on because I think it's a really important time. Oh, and there she is. Karma Doc has a wrench. Everybody watch out. Yeah, KK and Karma Doc with a wrench. You better be good. It's an important day. I think this is a very powerful turning point today, and it's not just the 3D energies. These energies are coming from all over the place. So we have multiple dimensions, I feel, are working on something very big that most people cannot see. But if you're in this room, you do have an understanding of what is going on a higher level. So yeah, this feels really weird. It feels like a lot of old energies are becoming new again, and it feels like things are going to be brought to light that need to be brought to light. Very important.
Oh, yeah, there is so much going on. I think there's so many layers, to it. It's hard to understate that. There's so much going on. This is so key. So key.
Yes, definitely a full moon, Mary. Yep, full moon stuff. Mm-hmm.
Robbie and Koma Kaneko, good to see you. Good to see you. Lee Thomas, blessings. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Elantra, good to see you.
Hi, great to see everybody.
Jay, good to see you as well. So, yeah, again, I want to reiterate an old story before we get started. There was a Hindu sage known for witnessing the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the events of these two different time periods, which were separated by an entire age. When you look to the Hindu holy books, the Ramayana is the story of Rama and Sita. That's what our puppies are named after. And, that's transpiring like Silver Age going into Bronze Age. And then the Mahabharata is the beginning of the Kali Yuga, the end of the Bronze and going into the Kali Yuga. There was this sage that saw the Ramayana 11 times and the Mahabharata about 16 times. So he saw that time kind of loops. We're on this never-ending, well, unless you want it to end. I guess as long as you want to be incarnating and taking part in this crazy journey, you can come back and do things over again and again and again. And I think that's really truly the case. And I think when we look at multiple timelines, we're just shifting to another possibility. Because ultimately, there is no time. When you step into your natural state, there really is no time. And even reincarnation, in some ways, doesn't exist in the matter. When we understand that we could step into our natural state and be out of time, all the incarnations really truly happened at once. And yet, here we are. In a reality that so many people don't have a clue of what our true nature is at all. And that will change. That is already changing just in the last year and a half to 2 years. It's already changed a lot. There's so many people that have woke up to the fact that you are an eternal being, your consciousness itself. And you're having an experience here as an embodied human at the beginning of a Bronze Age. And, we get to say what we want to have happen. Every single one of us, our consciousness really counts.
Is that what today is about? We're having this event happen, the news, the headlines, everything is on fire right now. Is this our chance to kind of create a newer timeline, a better timeline? It's our chance to be able to expand ourselves out of the old timelines, out of the old, situations where life turns really horrible. Do we actually realize that our energy can make a difference? And that's why we're coming here again to redo this so that we can hopefully do better. Is that what this is about? We know it's more than just what's in the 3D. So, we're going to be covering news and stuff, but I think this deeper level is important. KK says, she's like, I'm over. I want off of this. I want off of this ride, and I guess, I don't know, maybe if we do things and we get it, then we get to go move onward and upward.
Yeah, and KK, your higher self would tell you, nope, you're not ready because you're still here. And if the higher self was ready to call into it, it would, but you're still here. And it's because you have more to do and contribute. So that last part of this that I wanted to get across, this sage saw the Ramayana's events 11 times, Mahabharata 16. Each time it had a different ending. They had different endings. It doesn't have to be that the bad guy gets to do this and the good guy fails to do that. Yeah, I think, is that a Bruco sighting? Is that a Bruco sighting? Good to see you.
I think, Karma Doc, we're all kind of still here, so we're all screwing up. So let's just keep trying. I don't know of any other option.
Yeah, so I guess my whole point is we could change this outcome. Just all of us right here. We could change the outcome. Here you go. Nicolas Maduro surrounded by dozens of federal agents getting perp walked. Yeah, it's been a very eventful day. This could be an event that triggers an enormous series of reactions, actions and reactions. That is absolutely what comes next. And again, every single one of us, our input counts. You count. Don't think that you don't count. Don't think that everything is set in stone and there's nothing you could do about it. No. That's not empowering. And you are powerful beings.
Oh, it sure can be hacked, Kevin. I don't think they're expecting us to understand our own energy just yet. I think they're feeling that we're just going to blindly continue on and react out of pure fear and not respond in another way. I think that's what they're counting on.
Yeah, Mary, with Stranger Things. I really think there's a service there with things like Stranger Things and maybe the Marvel Comics stuff and, everything that we gotten from Star Wars and Star Trek. It's expanded our consciousness. And for many people, it's put out their possibilities that, when they were kids, they wouldn't have thought possible. So here we go. We have something's going to have to be done with Mexico. Trump floats further intervention to Fox and Friends. President Trump said Friday that the U.S. operation that led to the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro was not intended to send a message to Mexico, but he suggested additional action may be necessary to combat drug trafficking. Yeah, that's happened multiple times. And it actually goes on to say during the interview, co-host Griff Jenkins referenced comments from Vice President J.D. Vance that drug trafficking must stop and asked Trump directly whether the operation was meant to be a message to Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. Well, it wasn't meant to be, and we're very friendly with her. She's a good woman, Trump said before arguing that Mexican cartels, not the country's elected leadership, hold real power. She's not running Mexico. The cartels are running Mexico. And we could be politically correct and be nice and say, oh, yeah, she is. But no, she's very frightened of the cartels. Trump claimed he had repeatedly offered U.S. assistance in taking action against drug cartels operating in Mexico. They're running Mexico. I've asked her numerous times, would you like us to take out the cartels? No, Mr. President. No, please. Thank you. So, you could see where this is going. There is a bigger picture that we're going to touch on. You also have Marco Rubio saying the Cuban government should be concerned. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, a sworn foe of Cuba's communist government, warned Havana on Saturday after the U.S. forces deposed its ally, Nicolas Maduro, in Venezuela. If I lived in Havana and I was in government, I'd be concerned at least a little bit, Rubio told a news conference alongside President Donald Trump. So, obviously what's being signaled here is, there's not going to be certain things allowed in the United States backyard, so to speak. Reports indicate multiple Venezuelan Air Force fighter jets taken off amid rising tensions. Venezuela is reportedly deploying a mixed fleet, which does include U.S.-made F-16s, Block 15 Fighting Falcons, and Russian-built Sukhoi Su-30 Mk2s. So, yeah, they do have assorted fighters from both the NATO side and Russia's side from different time periods in different leaderships in the past. But you also have Venezuela's Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez, claiming the country was attacked by, the Z word, seeking to enslave the nation. She insists Venezuela will ignore Trump's administration's instructions on who can become the next president. Rodriguez says the entire country is mobilized and that Maduro is the legitimate leader and remains so. Now, Trump has said that Venezuela is going to be run by the U.S. He's come straight out and said Venezuela is going to be run by the U.S. until new elections can happen. So what's really going on? Who really controls Venezuela at this point in time? I guess that's anybody's guess. I mean, boots on the ground in Venezuela, which, he did point out, too, that we had boots on the ground there in Venezuela. Yeah, curious.
Well, he said he was pretty blatant about it. He says, we're going to run it. We're not going to let somebody else get in there and wreck the whole situation again. We're just going to take it over. So I was taken back by that a little bit. It's like, wow, that's bold. What's really going on here? And I wanted to point out, Miss Melanie says, this is important. This is just an important concept that I hope that a lot of people grasp. She says, the easiest thing for me to do to help control my frustration and anxieties is to realize that there are entities around that use that for food. Yes, ma'am, they do. That was life-changing for me. That was Dr. Emoto's water experiments were life-changing for me. So those things, just knowing that that's a reality, helped me change my attitude quicker and quicker and quicker. Sometimes it's not so easy to crawl up and out of the hole if you have major ups and downs. But with that knowledge, you tend to try a little bit harder to climb up out of the hole. We have to remember that we don't want to feed this second layer of beings. In fact, we are starving them out. And that's why I think a lot of problems are coming to the forefront. There's a lot of finger pointing going on. There's going to be a lot of accusations. And you know what that's good for? It's good for getting stuff out in the open. It's kind of like a divorce. So when a couple goes to court to get a divorce, you bet they're going to throw everything out there, all their dirty laundry out there. So, I was saying earlier on the other live, you got to get stuff out in the open. You have to get it out there in the open so you can see it and decide what to do with it. I think this is happening on a very large scale.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. There's a lot happening. There's a lot of different aspects and layers to this. Now, you have Nat Rothschild, the famous Rothschild family, originally named Bauer, by the way, post a statement on X praising and congratulating the removal of Nicolas Maduro from power in Venezuela. Venezuela's central bank is fully state-owned and controlled by the government. In 2024, Venezuelan government hired Rothschild & Co. as a financial advisor to assess its foreign debt. Rothschild & Co. laid out exactly how much the regime owed and who was owed the money. So, yeah, that's very interesting, is it not? Basically, he just posted something like "Good going, President Trump," or "Way to go," attaboy, that type of thing. This is what we know about Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi. Again, they were outside of the banking system that is the banking system for 90-something% of the world, the vast majority of the world. And really, again, to quote a Rothschild, we don't care what puppet's on the throne, just as long as we control the money supply, we can really control the throne. So, you could look at it from that aspect too. When you recognize there's been a control system in place that's been here for a very long time, and you recognize also that typically presidents, countries' leadership, they're given a role to play, and they shouldn't outstep their boundaries. I think they're supposed to stay in line and handle certain things, but other things, no. You're not allowed to go there. They, 86 certain things off their menus, so to speak. But the thing is that this is different time, where the Kali Yuga is over. The awakening of consciousness is well underway. Everything is being exposed. It's going to all be completely exposed. And how will the ones that have been making a living in the shadows, puppeteering the masses, be able to maintain their status, their control? I don't think they will be able to, so I think they probably realize they're going to have to cut their losses and, try to hold on to what they can.
I look at things and I think there's going to be a lot of situations where certain people in charge are going to try to force one thing or another. And whenever in life you try to force something, really force it, usually that blows up. That blows up in your face when you try to force something. It doesn't turn out well. So there's a little bit of us trying to gather our bearings in the sense where we need to step back into a state of flow and let the world choose, let others choose which direction they want to go. And this can go up, to this level when it comes to cities, towns, states, countries. It's like, everybody, just get your own stuff together. Focus on you. Focus on you. We're in everyone's business. Everybody's in our business. It's just a mess, and everyone's saying how everyone else is wrong. We're never going to get anything solved that way. We're just not. We have to step into a whole different way of understanding and simply being. And I think a lot of old things are going to come to light. A lot of things that we thought were put to sleep are going to wake up again and be utilized and used to show us how to live differently.
Yes, absolutely. There's so many layers to this. And then you have to wonder, again, consciousness is expanding, and we are coming in more direct contact with our higher selves. So we're going to be pulling frequencies from the higher self down into our regular lives. How about the leadership? How about the puppets? And what about when the puppets start to actually have a conscience, if they can? Let's listen to his words from 9 months before the 2024 election.
How about we're buying oil from Venezuela? When I left, Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil. It would have been right next door. How about we're buying oil from Venezuela?
So, obviously, they know what the script is. But the thing is, I think the script lays out plans depending on how much humanity awakens to their plans. So, I think there's like all these different possibilities. And I think that we have pushed away many of the very negative potential, roads to go down. I think we've moved away from the worst of the worst. I think that every time we awaken one more person to what's really going on, it gives us a better potential shot at a faster, smoother, easier change into a new way of doing things. China, this is the MFA spokesperson here. China is deeply shocked by and strongly condemns U.S.'s blatant use of force against a sovereign state and action against its president. Such hegemonic acts of U.S. seriously violate international law and Venezuela's sovereignty and threaten peace and security in Latin America and the Caribbean region. China firmly opposes it. We call on the U.S. to abide by international law and the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and stop violating other countries' sovereignty and security. So, it's a strong statement, but it didn't say anything like there's going to be any sort of military retaliation. Now, if we look to some of the prophecies that are out there, and without pulling them up, because we've done so many videos on them time and time again. Well, I think about Alois Ermeiler. He said that it was harvest time, that the war really breaks out in earnest. So according to the timeline that he saw, we're kind of past that time now. We're heading into the dead of winter. So, it wouldn't be right now. We'd have to wait probably 9-10 months to fit his timeline. But timelines can change, and I do think we may be on a different timeline. But he did see a timeline in which Russia blasts across Europe very quickly, and China comes down from Alaska and Canada into the U.S. and also coming across on the Pacific and literally invades the U.S. I think, I'm putting out hope that we've circumvented some of that. If you want to look at it from an obvious standpoint, we could say some obvious things. If, let's say, Trump really did know what was planned, which was an outright Trojan horse, which we did have, again, all the people coming over the border, millions of people coming over the border. Certainly there's a lot of sleeper cells waiting to be activated. They were never activated up to this point in earnest. What if a lot of the people that were intended to be sleeper cells had a change of heart once they got to certain places? Maybe they actually liked their neighbors. Maybe they actually got comfortable. Or maybe, they went back in a different direction. There's something going on that has, I really think, screwed up their plans big time. And I don't think we're on one of their real favorable timelines. But that doesn't mean they can't make life miserable for a little while. They can. But, what would you do if you realized, it's too late to put up a wall, you can't keep them out? I think what you would do is do what he's doing and, try to circumvent any more coming in, try to clean out that which has already infiltrated in and taken position, and get us ready, kind of like a war footing, so to speak. Because the power structure, which in my mind, just speaking bluntly, does include those that are called the shield that is colored red and all their minions, they want to set up China as being the number one power. Because, again, the surveillance state, 1984 Orwellian states are already in place there. And if the U.S. was conquered by China, then it would be at the end of a gunpoint that we would be told, biometric data, et cetera, Big Brother, better watch your social credit score.
Karma Doc is bringing up K26R. I think we should familiarize ourselves with that. I'm not read up enough on it to speak on it, but if she's throwing it out there, it's important. It's related to plague upon the land information. So look that up, understand it. I'll let Mike comment on it if he wants to, but I feel it's very important. I think they're going to pull out all the tricks. They're going to pull out all the stops. They're going to do all the things. They're going to try to make us miserable. The weaker they can make us. That's what this last 30 years has been all about. It's been about making us very weak through our diet, through our medicine, through, the medical system. When so many people that are in the medical system, they want to heal, they can't because they're forced to do certain things or you can't practice. It's very, very frustrating. So this has been 30 years of making us soft. And I think there's going to be one final blow, and it's not going to be pretty. So we need to stay focused on ourselves, on our health. We do a lot of that on evolutionary. It's what we do in our daily lives. It's what we do for a living. We help people find workarounds. A lot of people have very serious issues, and there's this common ways of healing are not working for them. Some people need rehab. They can't get out of their house. They might need to rehab from home. Get healthy. Find something to make yourself a little bit healthier, a little more healthier today than you were yesterday. It's not about perfection. It's just about progress. It's about learning. It's about teaching yourself that there's a new way to do things. But we need to find a way to get stronger. But keep in mind, it's been 30 years of really taking us down and making us soft. So it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, and I did several videos. I don't think I've talked about this in a few years now, but I did do several videos, still probably up, hopefully, or they might have been removed by YouTube. There was an article that you could still find. It was getting tougher to find it on Jeff Rents.com. And it was all about how there was a speech 20 years ago plus now, talking about the plan to infiltrate the U.S. and take over the U.S. and literally, repatriate with people from China. Just simply saying that when the population of China got to like 1.2, I think it was, or 1.3 billion, which they say they're beyond that, but that might not be the case because, again, they had the one-child policy for over a generation or two, several generations. So, I don't know if the population of China is really any more than the U.S. Again, it's the art of war. It's all about deception. But this Chinese general said that they've had plans drawn up for the longest time, and they would have to either wipe out a big chunk of their own population, or they'd have to take over Australia, the U.S., Canada, any one of them or all three or two of three, in order to send a lot of their population abroad again, colonists. And look at our history. The United States is full of colonists. And what we're talking about here is colonialism, that this has been going on forever. So would it and should it surprise us? I don't think so. There's been many references and plans about these two sides that are on a collision course, just like Christianity and Islam are on a collision course. But also China and the U.S. And, we're going to take a little look at that in more depth. What I see going on is the Monroe Doctrine being put into effect. So what is the Monroe Doctrine? It was designed to prevent foreign involvement in a weakened Spanish Western Hemisphere. Again, if you go back to your high school and college, history classes, we're talking about colonialism. It was England, France, Spain, but also some other countries too, Portugal, obviously, that came and took over the Western Hemisphere, the entire Western Hemisphere, and also other places as well. Let's not forget the Philippines. The Philippines still speak Spanish. It's an Asian nation, but they still speak Spanish and actually English. And they're actually a choice of a lot of expats, too, as a good place to go live. But anyway, going back to the Monroe Doctrine, it said no more European colonialism in our hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere. North America, South America is off limits to anybody, and that includes the Russians too. Although if you look at it, the Russians were in Alaska, Canada. They were in Washington, Oregon, and Northern California, as well as Hawaii. How many people realize that? I don't know. So in December 1823, in a message to Congress, Monroe, this is President Monroe. He was the fifth? I thought he was the fifth, yeah. I used to have them all memorized. Set forth the following principles, which would later become known as the Monroe Doctrine. The Western Hemisphere is no longer open for colonization. That's North and South America, Central America too. The political system of the Americas is different than that of Europe. The United States would regard any interference in the Western Hemisphere affairs as a threat to its security. The United States would refrain from participation in European wars and would not disturb existing colonies in the Western Hemisphere. So I think what he's doing is this. He's invoking the Monroe Doctrine. And this is all about that. In other words, the U.S., Uncle Sam there, is the dominant power in North, Central, and South America. And it's going to stay that way. So when you have Russia, China, and the BRICS nations exerting more and more influence in Central America, Latin America, that's not going to go along with that tenet. So what they want is to push them out, not allow them in, and for us to be the dominant power here, on the Western Hemisphere. This is President James Monroe. So this is all the way back in 1823. This doctrine declared the Western Hemisphere is no longer open to anybody's European colonization or anybody else, and warned other powers not to interfere in the political affairs of the Americas. What do we see going on? We've seen a lot of very curious statements. In fact, I want to say that Trump put a picture of President Monroe up in the White House. I remember him mentioning that. So Trump revives the Monroe Doctrine as a warning to China and Russia. But, the art of the deal. He's all about making deals. So this is why he's made mention of, no more money for Ukraine, no more, us paying most of NATO's military expenditures. They're going to have to carry their own weight. He's an isolationist in some ways, but it's a Western Hemisphere isolation. He wants to pull the reins in. I think it's deal making in some ways. There are real power brokers beyond the Red Shields and the Rockefellers and the Pope and the Black Pope and the Gray Pope and the secret societies. When we start talking about the real powers that are outside of our vision, maybe it's not third eye vision, but our two eyes typically. There's these ultra-terrestrial factions which really are what people are tiptoeing around. And, this is where the Bible is talking about, you're not wrestling just against flesh and blood. Powers and principalities. Yes, beings that are non-physical to our dimension, but can have a physical influence. And this is part of what they're talking about. There's different groups out there. It's not just one or two groups. And I think now maybe some people that realize who the Anunnaki are and were, maybe the Anunnaki get blamed for everything, but maybe it was actually in some cases the reptilians that are under our feet. And then maybe others recognize the reptilians but don't realize that there's off-world, ultra-terrestrials that are also interfering. And then there are some that are looking forward to a liberated humanity, that they could actually openly deal with us instead of, hiding in the shadows.
It's what we've been talking about for so long, is the understanding that there's a different entity that is involved here, something that's definitely not human, things that are out of our visible spectrum, because the visible spectrum is so teeny tiny. It's like this itty bitty sliver of information that we get compared to all of the things that are truly out there. Now, these other beings that are in charge, they stay out of the way. They stay out of the visible spectrum, but they have a hand in what's going on. And I did get some information about who is behind Trump, who is behind China, what's going on with Russia. I just don't feel really comfortable sharing it right here, right now, but I am getting information on that. And, this is otherworldly. This is not something that is just what we see in front of our eyes. This is pretty deep. It's pretty big. And there is another hand at play here.
Yeah, and I think we could say that the power that is nudging Trump on is not the same as the power that's nudging China. The power that's backing China is not the same as the power that's backing Trump. So, this is the thing. There's different factions within, an alliance, a tentative alliance of sort that had split our world up without consulting us. They split our world up without consulting us. And so, they've taken different groups of humanity. This is why we have countries and why we have these different areas, why they're not just one human state here on the earth, is because there's a variety of different groups in play that have split us up, and they have their own pet projects, so to speak. It's really truly reflected when we look at the wars that have gone on between, say, for instance, the European families. They're related, but yet, you had the 100-Year War with Britain and France. We've had numerous wars between France and Russia, for instance, and these nations change borders, but the reality is it's almost like they enjoy playing Stratego or Risk with us, chess for lack of a better word. So the ones that are behind Trump and emboldening him are not the same that are behind China. Now, I think too that faction within our own government that we would call the deep state, again, leaning over towards a certain direction, they were working actively, again, to go along with the whole power shift to the dragon, so to speak, the rise of Red China to be the dominant power. But if it seems that there are some other ultra-terrestrials that are emboldening Trump to circumvent those plans.
Mm-hmm. Robbie says, what percentage of that 99 can see us? I wonder. They can all see us. It's with us down in the visible spectrum, down lower than they are. Unless you build those abilities to sense and perceive, we don't see them. But a lot of people more and more now have that ability to tap into those realms and get information.
We've alluded to the fact that why do you see the different races of man? Well, the reality is they come from, they have origins in different places, different planets, different star systems even. And this is part of the reality that you'll never be taught in school. If you ever wondered, why are we all the same, but we're also different? And our karma doc, and I can't wait for her to come on with us, was bringing up a particular haplogroup. And, again, we understand that there's this horrible thing called biowarfare. And, again, certain haplogroups can be targeted. Other haplogroups might not be as prone to develop certain things, when we're talking about that type of weaponry. And it's interesting to note that there's certain haplogroups that are aligned together in this bigger scheme of things. And yeah, there's a lot to this. We'll be sharing more as we get it. But yeah, it's fascinating. But on the short end of this is kind of what is going on. When you looked to what happened, I think a lot of people were perplexed that Syria, which had a big Russian military base, there was a long-term war going on there. Then all of a sudden, boom, Bashar Assad is in Russia, and Syria is abandoned. And really, truly, you have Israel kind of taking over, and a little bit of Turkey taking over, and then other groups which are under our control taking over. Why would they do that? There's deals that are done that they never announce to any of us. And, when you look at what's going on right now, there very well may be deals in place. Hey, this is not going to be acceptable. And I've said this before, too. The Polish psychic picks up that Poland's going to be kind of betrayed and split into 3 parts. He's seen that. He's seen that numerous times. They're going to split up Poland into 3 parts. And it'll be part of a deal with Ukraine. And, combining part of Poland with Ukraine. And, when we look at the maps, man, I've done videos, again, showing that you just got to look every 50 years. You'll find pretty major changes happening, especially on Europe. In Europe as a whole, I mean, the countries are always changing.
Just like this Varshafala chart that I was talking about last live that we did, this is so very important when it comes to the death saham, and that being a total and complete change of everything that we know. It's letting go of old ideas. It's letting go of old identities. This ending, it's going to be slow, but it's also inevitable, and it's very, very karmic. And I think we just need to keep these energies in mind. Like, how are we going to deal with this? This system that we had, this is aging out. You notice they never really take care of our roads. They don't take care of our bridges. They don't take care of the infrastructure. They really do not update a lot of things. And why do you think that is? We have to look at all these things, and also hindsight is so 2020. I feel our hindsight is going to be critical moving forward, because we can predict a lot by looking back. And that's why I think this Monroe Doctrine is very important to look at, maybe even study. I think it can give us a lot of good information as far as what they have in store for us.
I think, again, what's going on, there's been so much revealed, the battle between the eagle and the serpent, the eagle and the snake. This is historic, and it's ongoing. As you see them holding the DNA there, Enki and Enlil. Now they're said to be brothers, and Enki is actually the elder, but Enlil's the one that was pegged to be higher positioned. But the reality is there's a lot of distortion in the Sumerian tales as well. When we look to the dividing, let me do this. When we look to the Greek gods, and you have Poseidon, right? Hang on one sec. You have Poseidon, Zeus, and then we have Hades, right? I'm going to bring that up.
Yes, Mike is going to bring up all of those things while we sit here and look and talk about looking back to the past. And yeah, we have a couple other channels. This is EEARTS, Evolutionary Energy Arts. I know that's a lot, and it's hard to remember. And if you don't like the news, we have Hearts Home, and that's a channel where it's just spirituality, and we talk a lot about that. So, spirituality, 3D, it all goes together. That's why we talk about all of it. You can't have one without the other when it comes to 3D and spirituality. They're 3D, 4D, they're, two sides of the same coin that go together.
So you have Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon. And Poseidon was giving me a time, but I couldn't spell it. What is the reality between the battles of these gods? Well, Poseidon is the god of the sea. Again, they're taken to be kin, brethren. But are they really? No, that's the thing. There's all these different groups that are represented by them. Again, Zeus, we can equate, again, in some ways to Enlil, God, that comes from the sky, and recognize it as a one of those that we would call Anunnaki, In fact, one of the hybrids, from the Anunnaki, and then Poseidon are representing the ones that are in the sea, because there's whole civilizations in our oceans. Our oceans, going back a little bit, the Earth is much bigger than what you see. The Earth is way bigger than what we're told. In fact, what we've gotten from the guides, best guesstimate is that what we know as the Earth is only about 20 to 25% of the real Earth. It's much bigger. And then Hades, who rules the underworld, is again another way to talk about the reptilian entities that are literally under our feet. And yes, some of those are definitely physical like us, 3D, but there are beings that are shapeshifters and also know how to change by basically meditating. They can shift their vibrational frequency and truly turn invisible to us. This is something that many beings can do. Humans have been downgraded. We've been downgraded and we've been kept in the dark because we have way more abilities than they want you to know. These abilities are going to be coming online shortly. They already are. So what you have is here are 3 different groups that are literally dividing, the world up amongst them. And, you could say they're all ultra-terrestrials. And this has a lot to do, again, going back to the Monroe Doctrine, because what you have here is a representation from one group through the use of Trump as sort of saying, let's continue to divide the world. We're going to do things differently in the sections. And this is what we've talked about too, with obviously if you're in China, you might have nicer smart cities. You might have a lot newer technology available, but you're going to be completely micromanaged. You have no real control of your own daily life. And, you can't say, no, I don't want to do this. No, I don't want to do that, because you're going to get ostracized with your social credit score and literally be homeless and, having to beg for food or try to go and subsist somewhere and live off the land, which I think is tougher in China than it is in the U.S. That's just a guess because I have not been to China. But I think this is what you have going on. You see Maha and the Maha movement, what I've seen from it, most of it is really stuff that had to be done. It's tried to make us healthy. I think, and this goes back to, what if Trump is really trying to make it tough on those that want to shift power to China by literally making us healthier? Because what was happening before was weakening us and making everybody sicker. But now things have been put into place. They're actually talking about revitalizing the soil. They've never said anything about the nutritional deficiencies that we have in the soil, which ultimately we eat the soil through everything that's growing in it by the way that we raise food and all the toxic GMOs and stuff. So I think this is part of what's going on. The taking over Canada and Greenland, it's part of the Monroe Doctrine. It's part of saying we're going to do things our way in the Western Hemisphere, and that the others can do what they want in other areas. At least it feels like it's an attempt at that.
Someone was asking, who are the speakers tonight, or who's the speaker? Mike and Cindy, and we're always coming back for more punishment. I mean, we just keep coming back for more and more and more, get the information out there. So, the people can wake up, and I know we make the system angry, and it's kind of what we do. So here we are. I hope you enjoy.
Yes, and welcome, Chris Sevenbrook. Glad that we can actually reach new people because we've been ostracized. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, we had Evolutionary Energy Arts from 2017. EEARTS started in 2019 when they demonetized and kept throwing strikes at Evolutionary. And then we have Heart's Ohm from about 2022, I think, or 2023. So that one we steer clear of the news. But on the other two, we kind of cover all sorts of things. And yes, we have done about 6,000 videos over 8 years. So we've been busy.
Regina has a really good question. I wonder how they'll revitalize the soil. Oh my gosh, that is so important when it comes to the world that we live in today, because so many of our mineral deficiencies are creating medical issues, and we're going to the wrong people to find answers. You know how hard we worked on one person, God bless her heart, and her problem was heavy metal issues, and she kept going to her doctor and she kept asking, can I get a heavy metal test done? Can you run heavy metals on my blood? And they would not, and and she nearly died. I mean, she is the strongest woman I know that I've ever known, and what she went through was so heroic, and it was so hard to get that. She never did get the heavy metal test done, but she did have the metals removed, and almost all of her symptoms vanished. And that's the kind of things that we are up against, is people with very unusual situations going on that need help.
Yeah, I have had also people say that I sound like Jeff Rentz a little. So, yeah, interesting. Over the past 4 decades, global economic hierarchy has had profound changes. Yes, absolutely. The U.S. is still the most powerful economic force on the planet, as you could see here, which actually it was supposed to be overshadowed by China, but it hasn't truly developed yet. But China, it has surpassed Germany, Japan, and many, many others. France, the UK, to be number two, and solidly number 2. Now the difference is, the U.S. has massive debt, and China doesn't have that massive debt that we do. In fact, nobody's even close to the debt we have. And when you look at, you have the U.S. $30.6 trillion, China $19.4 trillion, Germany now $5 trillion, Japan $4.3, and India $4.1 trillion, the UK at 4, France at 3.4, Italy 2.5, Russia at 2.5, and Canada 2.3. Russia, for all its vast military, and obviously it's the largest country land-wise by a mile, only 2.5 trillion as far as the economy goes. This is showing that was the plan. But I think, again, there's these different forces that want different outcomes. We had shared with you guys before that Cindy, who is, again, she's a trance channel. She can also channel while awake. She's very, very intuitive and psychic. She's able to typically see where people that have passed on are and communicate with them too. What she has gotten all these years has been pretty wild on the whole. Some amazing revelations throughout the years. But what we have going on right now is a massive, massive shift in consciousness, which really is, again, almost outpacing the ability of the control system to keep up with us. I think they are chasing us in many ways, even though it might seem that most of the world is still kind of sound asleep. Oh no, it's waking up far too fast for their liking, and they can't keep a handle on this. So yeah, I think that the very best laid plans are not coming to pass. We had gotten that there was an agreement that was put into place. In 1565, there was the Battle of Nuremberg, which I'll bring up. And basically, these warring factions of ETs were openly warring above our heads. And then there was an agreement put in place that held, and that agreement passed, back in June. Yeah. And there's been no agreement, so that's why we're in we're kind of in a wild card zone.
Yeah. We're in limbo right now. So that agreement, or what I call it a treaty. So it's very difficult for me to explain because it's a multi-dimensional understanding treaty that was put in place so that humans could be left alone and grow on their own without influences of external entities. Now, if humans have the ability to perceive or build their energy so that they can reach these other entities, that's one thing. But your average human does not do that. that is something that we specialize in. We specialize in helping people crack open their pineal gland, get in contact with their guides and their angels, have connection with their higher self, past loved ones, because that's important. That is such a big part of the world that we live in today. We need that contact, and it has been cut off through fear, through chemicals, through anger, through trauma. It's just not fair that so many people do not have that connection. But there has been a change. It is a bit of a wild card right now. There are many factions that believe that they should be seen. We are ready. We are ready for open involvement with them. Open contact. And we have seen so many times the deliberate photobombing of some of these entities with their ships, their light ships. I have people who have sent me pictures of light ships and other ships. It's very, very real. And that's where we're at. It's just a matter of, does the mainstream really want to drop that bomb? They have in some ways. We've seen it in Congress. We've seen it in the government where people have come forward. Mostly at this point, I think if people don't believe, they really don't want to, because the information is out there, and not every shred of information that's been put forward could possibly be a lie. If you look at it like mathematically speaking, not every piece of information can be a lie.
Yeah, so, just to clarify, like GDP is measured in a country's local currency, but to compare across nations, it's converted either using market exchange rates, nominal GDP, or purchasing power parity, PPP rates, with PPP being better for comparing living standards because it adjusts for local cost differences, showing how much a currency can actually buy. PPP adjusted GDP often shows different rankings than market exchange rate GDP, especially for developing nations. But getting back to this, it was actually 1561. There was another event in 1565, like 4 years later. That was in Switzerland, if I remember right. But yeah, literally, it was described as something that looked like Kylo Ren's ship, Darth Vader's type ship, up there, a huge black triangular ship, all sorts of orbs and spheres. Think about the drone stuff we had going on. Well, this is what was described in the sky, and literally people were just awestruck at everything going on. They thought it was like Armageddon, the end of everything. It was captured and it was shared. Just huge. A UFO battle. There's been a lot of people have talked about it. Literally ships coming crashing down, as you can see here, the whole sky on fire, because these groups, which again we can say that some of them are those that we would call the Anunnaki, some are reptilian, others that may be what we would call blue avians, and some people might have a problem with blue avians not thinking it's something that Corey Good and David Wilcock just made up. But no, I mean, again, there is a reality behind all this. And I do think a lot of times people get discredited just so that people will throw the whole baby out with the bathwater and think that there was nothing truly happening. But, or there is no real truth behind it. But there is, there is absolutely. So many of these small spherical ones were probably drones. And also, of course, you would have grays involved. Grays are a race that's, a variety of different beings, from completely AI robotic to partially having actual living flesh and DNA. And then there are some that are literal beings, flesh and blood.
Well, yeah, I mean, grays are very, 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 there's so many different kinds, and you can't isolate them and say that they're all bad either. These are energies that, yes, there can be bad ones, but there's also some that are out there that aren't so bad.
Yeah, so, this is just interesting to note, and the point is that, that collision course again. Meanwhile, what really happened was pretty wild. There was like all sorts of plane cancellations, people stranded in the Caribbean. as you had the FAA closing the airspace for Maduro's capture. Over 700 flights traveling through U.S. airports had been canceled by noon Saturday. Over 300 cancellations at Luis Muñoz Marin International Airport in Puerto Rico, representing almost half the scheduled arrivals and departures, and more than 125 cancellations at JFK. JetBlue canceled more than 200 flights. So this was a big deal. By the way, North America leads the largest, this is liquid natural gas export surge since 2022, surging liquefied natural gas exports from new North American export plants likely pushed global LNG shipments in 2025 by the most since 2022. So the annual rise in 2025 would be the steepest increase in global LNG exports since 2022, when the shipments grew by 4.5%. So North America, a key supplier of new LNG volumes. And then as Canada's first ever export facility, LNG Canada started shipments in the middle of 2025, and Plaquemines LNG in Louisiana launched operations and ramped up shipments throughout the year. So the U.S. is set to become the first LNG exporter in the world to have passed in 2025 a threshold of 100 million tons in a year. So there's a lot going on here. There is so much. This is a huge kind of like battle for the planet ongoing. And really what you have is, we humans are kind of proxies. All these human governments are kind of proxies for a much bigger war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we're starting to see the picture slowly come together now, and we're going to see more and more and more too. Things are going to be brought up when it comes to, there's going to be new security structures put in place. There already has been. It's just they haven't made it widely known, but it's going to be widely known. I don't think we're too far away from that digital ID, and if you go out and about and buy things, you're going to need that, and I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. I just see that the security structures are all going to change, and they're going to do that in the way to, they're going to say, well, this is for your own safety. But for them to say that, they're going to have to have something big happen. So I am quite concerned about that, and then they're also messing with people's emotional identity. That's a really big deal too, to mess with our identity in a way that we question our own selves. The future is going to be bringing some really big change.
I told Cindy this, that there's another atmospheric river which is targeting California and the West Coast with more heavy rain, more snow. They say 5 to 6 feet of epic snow possible in Sierra Nevadas, as well as the possibility of 10 inches and howling 55 plus winds. And immediately Cindy was thinking this, or at least sensing that this could be weather warfare that's underway.
I believe so. I believe we're definitely going to have that. We have a Jane sighting in the house. Hi, Jane. Big hugs. Great to see you. So happy to see you in the chat. Yeah, I think that they're going to start bringing in some weather warfare. It could get serious, so everyone should be prepared to the best of your ability. Again, don't allow yourself to fall into that fear place. Just get prepared. If an urge hits you and you're concerned, let it rise, let it fall, go about your day. But don't let those emotions and feelings stick.
Yes, and we love and miss you, Miss Jane. Good to see you. And Heyoka, or Peter, Quantum Financial System, or QFS, Spiritually Protected. Again, I do think there are those that want to see things transfer smoother and easier to us literally governing ourselves eventually. Not that it's going to happen overnight, but there are powers that be that would love to see that. Again, be very, very aware of this. All this water weighs a ton. I mean, it weighs many tons, trillions of tons. There's been so much water coming down across Cascadia, all the way down through the San Andreas to me, I mean, I think they're trying to boost the likelihood of triggering the big quakes. And again, weather warfare, I think it's a reality, as well as the potential to make earthquakes. Go back to Tesla and his earthquake machine.
Because says, you don't love me anymore. What about me? Of course we do. You've been around since the very, very beginning. We are so honored to have so many people that are sticking with us throughout this whole thing and have walked with you guys on your very personal journeys and, watched you learn and grow and get healthy and just, all around feel better. So thanks for hanging with us.
Yes, absolutely. Now, this, which wasn't big, it still really hit me. Some calling it a 5.7 quake that was recorded right off the coast of Martinique. So what's the big deal with that? Because it's right off the coast of Mount Pelée. And Pelée erupting was one of the things that Casey saw. He said that when Pelée and Etna go, then you're literally like 3 months till California has the big one. So Pelée is not erupting unless it did since I did this. But the fact that there was a pretty good sized quake over there, that made me very cautious. And let me just take a peek while we've been live as to what we have going on. This was a little odd one. This is in North Carolina. You will see these stragglers up there in the Appalachians, but not really big. It's north of Asheville, southeast of Knoxville. Relatively quiet, relatively normal. And the biggest quake at the moment is a 5.9 on the southeast Indian Ridge. There you go. That's a 5.0, and there's the 5.9. So, quiet right now. But the weather, man, it's been brutal. Flash floods kill 17, destroy 1,800 homes in Afghanistan. We still have that whole mud flood situation, which always seems to coincide with all these other events ongoing. Did you? I like, there's so many people waking up health-wise. This is one of the best things that we're seeing is the amount of people that are waking up health-wise. It's really refreshing to see, little kind of comical but very, very serious cartoons. And, it's about time. Bovine colostrum, 60% reduction in illness days. 75% reduction in flu episodes. I think I could live off protein shakes. I really can lately. Again, understanding that certain things that were always pushed on us, there's natural things that are far better. And, I would have much rather have seen this personally. I would have been even more excited to see this. I could only hope that it's still going to come, or maybe you could have that BG guy there, or maybe that sickle maker guy, or Klaus and Co.
I know, that would have been great. We would have had a all-day thing or something. That would have been really great to see something.
24 hours
yeah, straight. That we would. I mean, that would be very effective. And as far as that oarfish showing up, I mean, those are very, very important. So what those do is they reflect from the planet's nervous system before humans do. So when pressure and waves, magnetic distortions, they feel it. And there's an energy about them, and their bodies just kind of crack and they move up. So those oarfish are very important. And it's definitely a sign that they are feeling those tectonic plates.
So that was found off the California coast.
Yes.
Yeah, they've been found around Japan too at times, and Japan has had really big ones. I'm going to go back in my notes because I did write it down because I did have like these visions where I saw Cascadia and I saw the San Andreas. And then I was thinking that we were going to have big events happen back in 2024 in April. and the guides came through, and literally, it was they're coming through with Cindy saying, Michael, your clock is short, is what they said. Your clock is short. So in other words, I was jumping the gun. But I do see a lineup that's coming that, may be pointing towards this year. So I was going to go back and see what the actual dates are on those visions that I had. Because, I've shared with you guys before, I had a vision of the Twin Towers 1 year exactly to the day before they were hit. And I was in the Twin Towers multiple times. I used to live in Fairfield, Connecticut. So, it was a thing for my mom, my uncle, myself, and then later on in life with friends to go into New York City, just to get some good food. And then, why not go up to Twin Towers and, check out the view. And, I remembered exactly what the whole thing looked like from the inside very well. And, I had that vision. I didn't even know I had that vision. It was a dream, but that I wrote down. I didn't know about writing down having this dream until I think it was 2005. I was going through an old dream journal, and I saw that I actually seen it 1 year to the day before. That was really cool. This is really cool. Brain cancer, 3 years survival rates. Without keto, 8% survival. With a keto diet, 66%. And the link goes to frontiersin.org. Yeah, keto, a ketogenic diet can work wonders. Whether it's a lifestyle change that you make permanent or just temporary. If you eat keto, you're going to reduce inflammation. And inflammation's the root cause of so many different diseases.
I keep hearing that, inflammation of the brain causing the ADHD, autism, so many problems. And not to say that they're not there without the inflammation, but the inflammation can definitely be a factor in making it difficult for those poor little neurons to do what they need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The little things we can do, like hopefully none of this is in anybody's pantry. None of these, seed oils are not good like this. These are not good. Basically, we get organic olive oil, which I love the taste of, coconut oil to cook with at higher heat, and avocado oil as well. Sesame for certain recipes.
I don't even think they're good for your car.
Well, I don't know. I don't think they do a good job as an engine lubricant. Maybe they do. But yeah, it says you're not depressed. It's just that 20% of your diet is made of engine lubricant. Again, diet and exercise. Today killed me because I didn't lift weights. And I love to lift every day. I love to do cardio every day. And I did do cardio and Qigong, but I took a day off for the joints. So, we had to become farmers because, mainstream food is poison. Well, it is. It really is. Instead of treating root cause disease, our doctors prescribe more, the P word, and they don't do certain things with their kids. A lot of people are grabbing onto this. The past is the future. And, again, eating clean, getting out in the sunshine. And I wish they would stop the sky writing, you know what I mean?
I think we need to normalize, buying 100 acres and pulling people together. And no, it's not going to be easy because people are planted, people have roots, people have families, people have school, jobs, they have bills to pay. It's not easy to pull together a community, but we need to start talking about it, get the conversation going. Think about figuring out something where people can come together if they want to. If we want it bad enough, we're going to make it happen. I think it would be helpful if we at least had a head start, or at least had, people where people wanted to pull to and be around those people if they were able to. That would be good.
Yeah, I had gotten from the guides years ago that what was to happen was that, people are going to come together in little communities, and these little communities will grow. And they're just going to kind of do their own thing outside of the main system. And again, I think that depending on where you are in the world, it could be easier or harder, because I do think it's going to be very different from one part of the world to another, from literally one border to another, until we get to the point where we're deeper into the Bronze Age and the whole system is just a relic of the past. Look at this, an abandoned bridge that is unexpectedly transforming into a city. How cool is that? That is so cool. This is in China, by the way. And again, the people all around the world, I think for the most part, the average people, the vast majority, just simply want to live a peaceful life and get to do things that they want to do. Not necessarily work 40 to 50% of the time just to pay taxes to, fund these rich people, that abuse all the rest of us. No. And again, I do hope that there'll come a time when there's no wars on the planet. That's what we got to keep pushing out there. Those positive vibes. And speaking of positive vibes, Cindy's got some tuning forks ready. This is our tradition if you're new. Frequency. Frequency is everything. Dr. Masaru Emoto showed that frequency from, say, a tuning fork, for instance, can literally change the structure of water. It literally writing on a piece of paper, love, taping it to a glass, will change the structure of the water into a more positive vibration and frequency. Now, doing the same thing and putting hate there will do just the opposite. So Cindy has tuning forks that will help to tune you back to a natural frequency, a good, healthy frequency.
Indeed, and it involves thinking happy thoughts. This is so critical, and drinking plenty of water after the shows. So we're going to put some positivity out in the world, because more of us together, when we do this together, it resonates further and it's stronger, and the energy goes out there and it makes a difference. It has an effect. So this is great. We're going to do 3 dings. Think a happy thought. Here we go. By the way, this was DNA repair. I hope you liked it. Enjoy your evening. Thanks for coming and supporting us, and however you do, please do a thumbs up. It helps the lives. Source bless and namaste.
Much love, guys. We will see you again tomorrow, and we will probably go live again tomorrow as well. Wild times. Thanks for being part of the family. Thank you for sharing this ride. It is an honor and a pleasure. Much love, source bless, and namaste.